Hey, welcome to Peering into the Human Brain, SHS 230. Um, let's talk about this class. The graphic had to pop up. Okay, I know that some of you from my previous classes have told me that you signed up for this one, so you can skip ahead about 5 minutes. But if you haven't had a class with me and you want to know uh, about me, you don't have to. You can skip ahead too, I guess. Um, so I teach in Tempe. I teach both online classes, as you know, and also in person classes at ASU Tempe campus and also ASU Polytechnic campus. I was born in Mesa. That is not going to mean much to you if you're not from Arizona because you don't know frame of reference. But if you do live in the Phoenix metro area, I know some of the students do, then you know about Mesa, and then you probably also know about Hamilton, which is where I went to high school, graduated from there. Um, then I went to ASU and I got my bachelor's of science, my master's, and my PhD, all there at ASU. Then I worked there and still work there. So I've been there for a while at ASU. Um, in the time that I was in the program at ASU, I had a lot of different majors. I came in, I wanted to write movies. That was like the thing I wanted to do. I want to write movies. And they didn't have a film program. They actually did, but the advisor told me they didn't. So they put me into a journalism program. Not the same thing. I don't know what was up with that person. But this is me at the radio station, the ASU radio station called The Blaze, which was before that online one that totally stole our name. Um, it was great. I was a production director, which was a lot of like audio editing. So if you've had 375 with me, speech science, I talk a lot about radio station stuff, and that's where I got my start looking at acoustics and audio stuff. Um, then acting, stopped that, quit that, went to acting. Was in a couple movies, fun stuff. This is still from one of them. Then I ended up going into psychology and creative writing before that, then psychology. Uh, I was going to do like therapy stuff and then volunteered in a cognitive psychology lab. And then that's when I was like, oh, this is actually what I want to do for the rest of my life, not this other stuff. Although acting might have been fun. So I stuck with cognitive psych. Cognitive psych really isn't, it shouldn't be called psychology by any stretch of the imagination. It has nothing to do with therapy or anything like that. In fact, cognitive psychology is more of a neuroscience, biology, statistics hybrid, essentially. So you're putting all these things together. So exactly what we're doing in this class. In fact, this entire class could be a cognitive psych class. In fact, in the field, we've started calling ourselves cognitive scientists because when you tell people that you're a cognitive psychologist, they will say like, "Oh, well, let me tell you about my brother, and you can tell me why he acts that way." And we're like, that's not what we do. And even your family will do this. They'll be like, "Oh, what are you getting your degree in again?" And you tell them, and they're like, "Okay, let me tell you about this dream I had." And you're like, "That's not really not what we do." But I could tell you about short-term memory, and they're not interested in that. They never are. So my specialty in cognitive science was auditory and visual perception, which we are gonna talk about, bro. It's gonna be great. Obviously, we're gonna talk about audio stuff. It's a class offered through speech and hearing, so we'll talk about some of that. But then I finally get to talk about my visual perception stuff, which I never do in my other classes more than just a little bit. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Okay, let's talk about research. Um, there's a lot of stuff on this slide. one of the things that I'm doing is I research swear words. This is one of the earlier things that I was looking at with swear words. Essentially, there's different phonemes that are used at different rates for swear words versus non-swear words. A and are those phonemes. We're going to talk about this a little more in the class, and so I won't go through all the details, but essentially e and oo are not used at all in swear words, or very little, practically at all. There's like one. And those tend to be the sounds that are used for infant-directed speech or talking to your dog, talking to little kids, stuff like that. If we want to make something sound cute, we'll use E and oo. The word cute, oo. So there you go. Swear words use the opposite, the sound on the opposite side of the vowel quadrilateral from E and oo. There's a lot more. We'll talk about more later. We probably won't talk about the talking drum stuff. It doesn't really have a cognitive aspect to it, or a neuroscience aspect, so we probably won't. But the doon doon drum is another thing that we've looked at. Essentially, just the doon doon drum, also called the talking drum, is an instrument used in Nigeria that can change its pitch, unlike most drums. So you can kind of go like boom, 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 boom with the drum, because you can tighten the top of the drum, which makes a different sound. And because it can change its pitch and you can make it, kind of like go at any time, just like a typical drum, it can be used to replicate speech. The speech spoken, the language spoken by the people in the area where the doon doon is used is called Yoruba, which is a tonal language, meaning that the tones that the words are said at, high, medium, or low, make a different word. And so you can actually use the drum to speak, because you can have patterns of high, medium, and low tones coming out of the drums that people can then interpret as speech. And that's why it's called the talking drum. So the research that I've done on this, 2 papers so far, it's probably going to turn into 5 eventually, or more, is basically just showing that the drum is timed. It has the same timing patterns and micro pitch structure that speech does. So it's not just, it kind of works like speech. It's not just like an analog for speech. It's doing exactly the same things that speech is. Tetrachromacy is 4 color cones. We're going to talk a lot more about that, so I won't say a ton right now. Yeah, been working with a tetrachromat. Is a person who can see more cones. Most of us have 3 color cones. She has 4, and so she can see more colors than we do. I'll talk so much more about this. This research is really, 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 really exciting. And then last thing over here, this is some work that I've done with Alzheimer's. This graph that my head is partially covering up. Essentially, what this is showing is that we can use a forgetting curve on a typical word list memorization task, which we'll talk more about that too. But essentially what you do is you give people 20 words, and they have to remember all the words. They report the words back to you. Nobody's going to remember them all. So that's why it has good, like a good range to show someone's brain health. Perfectly, 25-year-old person who does a lot of athletics and pretty smart, chances are you're probably not going to max it out. You're not going to get all 20. You might, but it's not like a problem if you get 18 or 17 or something like that. So what we can do is we can use this to watch as people start to lose the ability to do this. And the rate at which they lose the ability to do this can help us predict if that person has Alzheimer's or not. We'll talk more about that because there's interactions with the risk factors for Alzheimer's. But anyway, we'll talk more about that later. This slide is basically just like a greatest hits of the coolest studies I've done. I can't talk about them all. Okay, let's talk about the class schedule. If you've taken a class with me before, and some of you have taken like 4 classes with me. Is that true? Yeah. Some of you have taken 4 classes. 205, 367, 310, and 375. And you know that I have kind of like a structure that I like to use. Like it's always the same thing. Well, I didn't make this class. This was kind of a last minute thing. I didn't construct it. Somebody else did, and then they weren't available to teach it. But they were like, "Oh, this is what you actually have a degree in, so maybe you should teach this class." And I said, "Maybe so." So here I am. But because I didn't construct it, it does not have the way that I typically construct a class, which would be like a ton of exams and a ton of quizzes. No. Instead, there's 2 exams. No dropped exam. No notes on those exams. There's 7 quizzes. No notes on those quizzes. So they're like mini exams. The lowest of those is dropped. There's 5 labs. Those you should definitely get full points on. It's really fun stuff. It's just kind of like play along with whatever we're talking about that week. You get to do it, and then you make a little post about it. Totally fine. There's going to be 7 discussion posts on Yellow Dig. That's not something you have to download. It's just going to be a link on the Canvas page. And there's 2 study guides. That's just like a fill in the blank in your study guide based on the lectures and stuff in the class. You fill those out, you turn them in, you get points. Those are easy points. The labs are easy points. The discussions are easy points. Don't lose points on those by not doing them. Get those points. And then the others, that's where you could lose points. So study. Use your study guides to take the exams. Your quizzes were going to happen after each week, so you shouldn't have like a huge burden of memorization on those. And they're relatively short. So, okay, little different structure if you know my usual structure, but shouldn't be too bad. Well, you're all going to be fine. Okay, let's talk about the exams really quickly. Like I said, they're closed note. This time we're using Honor Lock. So usually I like to use Respondus Lockdown Browser. This time it's Honor Lock. I'm going to have a link to Honor Lock. Yes, you have to download it just like Respondus. It's another program. This is going to bog down your system. Sorry about that. There's so many things that we make you download, right? Audacity and Pratt. Mostly it's me. Sorry about that. 90-minute exams, unless you have accommodations to be longer than that. And then it's going to be that times 1.5 or that times 2. You can't go back on these questions. You have to answer the question and then move forward. You can't go back. You're not going to be able to see what you got wrong, but after you take it, you can, however, meet with me and we can go over your exam. There might be some extra credit for participating in research studies. My lab, which is called the Copper Mule Lab, cognition, perception, music, audition, and language. There's so many letters. Cognition, perception, music, audition, and language lab. We may be running something, or any of my other colleagues might be running something too. So there's going to be at least one thing that you can do for extra credit. There could be more based on how many studies are running, although it's summer, so, maybe not a ton. DRC and sales. Hey, the DRC, which used to stand for the Disability Resource Center, now it's called SAILS, which is Student Accessibility and Inclusive Learning something. So close. Solutions? Let's just say it's solutions. It gives you the idea what it's for. So you can visit them in person or digitally. If you live around ASU, you can visit them in person, any of the campuses. Polytechnic, Tempe, Phoenix, Havasu closed, so you can't go to that one if you live close to that one, but we do have a campus in LA, and guess what? We're opening one in Hawaii, maybe. Oh, we have an ASU campus in Hawaii. We may have CHS stuff out there soon. So if you live in, I think, the Big Island, or if you live in LA, you can go to sales there too. For the rest of you, go online. Or if you just don't want to leave that day, go online. Um, you can talk to people that work at sales to see if you think you could use some sort of accommodation. Now, here's the thing. I think like dyslexia, test anxiety, auditory processing disorder, some of these things you might already know about yourself, so you should talk to them if you don't already have accommodations, although I know some of you do, and that's great. If you feel like, if you know that you should have accommodations and you haven't gotten an email from them, definitely talk to them. And then the other thing is you can see with sales if you might qualify for some sort of accommodations. It never hurts to see if you qualify, because nobody knows if you don't qualify. It's not like they tell anybody that this person is coming in. Oh, well, we think they're faking it. They're just trying to get extra time. No, they don't tell anybody. They don't tell your family. They don't tell your instructors. It's totally confidential. It's like a HIPAA thing. Or FERPA. I think this might bridge the gap between FERPA and HIPAA, so you get like double whammy on that. If you do qualify, of course, your instructors are notified because we have to know to give you some sort of accommodation, but it could be the difference between succeeding in the class and failing. I had a student a few semesters ago who, this was in person, he wasn't doing so hot in the class, and he came up afterwards and he's like, hey, the reason I'm not doing so good in class is because I don't have time to get through all the questions. And I'm like, okay, I didn't really believe him at first because, people who don't do well in the class can sometimes come up with reasons why they're not doing well in the class that aren't, it's not me. It's not that I didn't study. It's all these other reasons. So I assumed that this was the same kind of thing. So I looked at his exam, and it was true that until like 3/4 of the way through the exam, he was getting like almost 100%, 98%. Couple tricky questions here and there maybe, and then the end of it was just like not answered at all. And so I said, like, okay, so what's going on? Like, why does it take you so long? Are you overthinking? And he's like, no, I have to read it. Sometimes it's hard to read and make sure that I know what it's saying, so I have to like follow along and read this a few times to make sure I know what it's saying. And then I go to the answers and I have to do that too. And I said, hey, this sounds like kind of like dyslexia. Do you think maybe you have dyslexia? And he's like, no, I don't think so. And I'm like, well, I think you should go to sales. It sounds like you might. Turns out, yes, he did have dyslexia. He started using a font called Open Dyslexic, which usually I show on the slideshow, but I forgot about it. I'll post a link to it in the class. We actually might talk about it in visual perception in this class. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's a cool, brief topic. But the Open Dyslexic font looks a little different than these. It's kind of got like a wider bottom on it, and it helps some people with some types of dyslexia be able to read. So he got this font, he installed it on his computer, he made everything on the computer use the Open Dyslexic font, and all of a sudden he was doing a lot better in the classes. What we ended up doing for his exams were I would just send them digitally to the sales, and I don't know if they put him in Open Dyslexic font or they just gave him extra time, but I think it was the font and extra time. And he started doing really good in the class, in all of his other classes too. And then he got into medical school, so which he wouldn't have, based on the grades that he was getting before the dyslexia diagnosis. So the reason why I'm telling you the story is, if there is something that makes it seem like the coursework is not coming easy to you, and it's not because you're not studying, like you're gonna have to study, but if there's some reason other than you're not devoting enough time to it, that might mean that you need some accommodations. And then that could totally change your experience. So if you need help navigating it, you can talk to me, but just go on Google and search for ASU sales, and that'll give you the link, and you can email them directly too. And then they'll keep everything confidential. I'll keep everything confidential too, but if you don't want to email me, that's fine. And you can just go through sales. Okay, last thing. Here's what we're talking about first in classes. Your favorite book? That's not right. It's the other thing down below. What's the most interesting recent neuroscience finding to you? Um, Well, here's an interesting thing that I've heard recently. I don't know if this is the most interesting thing. It's hard. It's hard to say. This is kind of like saying what your favorite movie is because there's all sorts of really interesting studies that have come out recently. But a colleague of mine was telling me about. I'm a runner. I didn't mention that, but that other picture that I showed was me at a running competition. This one here, me and some other dudes at a running thing. Um, she's a runner too, and she was saying that what's really interesting is that long distance running, we're talking like marathon plus, so marathons and ultra marathons, will actually cause breakdown of, I think, the myelin sheath. It may have been other lipids in the brain too, but there is some evidence that there's a breakdown in some of the lipids in the brain. Myelin sheath is a lipid layer that helps the neuronal signals conduct from one point to another. It could be either that this is like detrimental, like maybe you're running too much and you're having to start like pulling nutrients from the brain to the body, or the researchers think it could be like how you break down muscle to rebuild the muscle stronger. It actually might be strengthening some of the protections and lipid layers in the brain. So we're not totally sure. It could be really bad, or it could be really good, or it could be not. It could be nothing. Like it just goes back to the same way that it was. Who knows? But that is what it seems like is going on with long distance running. So what's really cool about this is it's a weird finding that then kind of opens the door to future research to figure out, like, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Does this have basically no effect on us? One other interesting thing about running, it's not really a neuroscience finding, is that exercise, cardio exercise, and strength training will increase inflammation in the body in a very short time period. So like as you go out running and for maybe an hour afterwards, there's more inflammation in the body. But then it recedes, and it actually then has a protective factor against future inflammation. So that, which is good. I mean, you encounter like some sort of illness or any other thing that can cause inflammation, PFAS, the plastic, the microplastics that we're eating, air pollution, all this other stuff causes inflammation. So if you're building your body to be resilient against inflammation through cardio and strength training, then that's good because you'll counteract all these negative effects of inflammation. So again, the interesting thing about this is it causes inflammation short term, then it protects against inflammation long term, and it can actually reduce inflammation if you already have it. So, and that's not ultra marathons. That is short runs, 5K, 10K, and strength training also. But I don't think they looked at powerlifting. So just like normal stuff. And I don't know if the results are the same for ultra marathons or not, or maybe that has something to do with what's going on with the lipid layers in the brain. So that's one of the most interesting things that I've been thinking about lately. You now will tell me yours in a discussion that we have in the class. If you don't know of one, you can look up some and you can post about them. Post the link to the studies that you find. I'll also post the links to mine. And we'll just talk about those a little bit for the first little. If you're on between Friday and Monday, the class hasn't like officially started, but this video's up and this is open, so we can do that between Friday and Monday. If you're here after Monday, that's fine because the first week is still. This is all going to be up for the first week. So we'll just talk about that for the first week. And that's it briefly. One more thing. Because this isn't my class and I haven't set everything up, it's not going to be like, here's mostly me doing all the videos like it usually is. I'm going to come in sometimes because I have to record these all right now while we're going through the class. So I'll add some other stuff, like some stuff that I've done, some research that I'm reading about currently to update like what's currently going on in the field. But some of the videos are going to be what are already here. So you're not going to necessarily see me a ton. I am here. You'll see me at least once a week introducing everything. We'll have some office hours throughout the course. And, of course, you can email. Okay. That's it. And I will talk to you about your most interesting findings soon.